Given over 600 or more, maybe 700 presentations on this topic since 1992, but probably from 2011 and onward. But before I do, I want to, the Agenda 21, our detractors, by the way, I won't go on, I should go under the name of Professor Willie soon, because I've got threats against me too, so so I'll be Willie soon. Although he's a much better looking man. The real Willie soon is much better looking than I am. So they'll say that it's a conspiracy theory, that's no such thing. They try to, the term gaslighting. Anybody know what the term gaslighting is? Yeah, and that's happening a lot in many places. But before it got exposed in the early, like 92 and 93, there was a little booklet or a book put out by the UN. It's called Rescue Mission, Planet Earth, a children's edition of Agenda 21. And this is some of the most vile propaganda that I've ever seen. Gorbachev is in here, you know, the man that put booby-trapped toys on the Afghanistan countryside, killing little children, maiming little children. Not such a nice guy. And Al Gore's in here too. Also, but it said that the book is copywritten by the children of the world. And since I have 5 of them, I said, is it okay if we reprint this? So we actually put this in a PDF format, and it's on our website. I'm not going to reprint it in hard copy. I think it costs a little bit of money if you go on Amazon. But if you want to get a copy of it, download it free. Go to our website. There's a section called Downloads, and you can find it there. But I'm just going to pass it around. There's one thing here. It shows children concerned when their mother brings a new baby home. Oh, gee, Mommy, there's just too many. I don't know of anybody. There are some siblings that are jealous of a newborn, but I can't say, oh, there are too many children, Mommy, you should have left that in the hospital. That's baloney, it's a lie. Yeah. So, and they are scaring children. These classrooms all over the world produce people like Greta Thunberg. You know, they actually believe that we're all doomed, and it was 12 years, but now that was 3 years ago. But, you know, I remember in junior high school that global cooling, we will all be wiped out. So if you're in your mid-50s to mid-60s, you remember that. And it was the same, it was carbon dioxide. I thought, oh my goodness, hey, I like the snow, but I don't want to have snow year-round. And it was a lie. So I'm going to get into Agenda 21. I want to pass this out. Just tell her if you want to. So, Agenda 21, and they've rebranded it. And it's interesting. Anytime things get too exposed, you know, the Federal Council of Churches was founded back in the early part of the 1900s, 1910 or so. It got so controversial as basically a communist front, they changed it to the National Council of Churches. Same group, just changed the name. So they rebranded it, a Sustainable America, Agenda 21. So I have this Agenda 21 to Agenda 2030. I'm going to skip over here. Now, if you go, now you see this little cartoon. You see the COVID virus and Agenda 21. And when I first saw this, I said, what's the connection here? And of course, it's easy. It's the Great Reset. They are using this scare of this scamdemic to get us into the Great Reset or Agenda 21. But let me point out, COVID had a few positive things. You say, what are you talking about? What could be positive? Number one, many parents for the first time learned the garbage that's being taught in these government schools. And they pulled them out. Now, it shouldn't have taken 4 generations, but it's a great sign. The other side, the Agenda 21 people want to put us all in densely populated cities, get us out of the countryside. If you go up to northern Maine or Aroostook County, you can see evidence of that. You'll see little towns like Mars Hills where half the businesses are gone. A lot of wind turbines all on the mountainside. It's not enriching that community one bit. But what's happening is people are moving into rural areas. My family decided after living in Boston, I say behind enemy lines, all our life, it was time to get out of Dodge. And we did it on our own. No one forced us out, but I thought, and so God opened up a door in beautiful Alton, New Hampshire. We couldn't be happier. When I was at an information table in northern Maine, Aroostook County, at the balloon festival, hot air balloon, not hot air as in propaganda, but hot air, suspending the... that reminds me of I'll tell this joke at campfire. Remind me of the hot air balloon, okay? I asked people, where you from? And most people came from all around the country, moving to Aroostook County. Most of them are conservative, patriots, Christian types. And so it was kind of, oh, by the way, Aroostook County, Donald Trump got one electoral vote in all of the Northeast, and that's Aroostook County. And we get up and we have some influence up there. So I think maybe we had a tidy role in that. And Maine is one of the two states that they can split the electoral votes. There's two members of Congress, so the second district in the last two election cycles. Now, if you go up to the average person and say, Agenda 21, do you know what that is? They'll have no idea what you're talking about. But if you say the Green New Deal, they say, oh, of course we know what the Green New Deal is. So I want to thank AOC for this. And by the way, I'll criticize her. That doesn't mean I want to date her. She actually came out and said that. If you're Republican, you just want to date me. Well, first off, I'm very happily married. I'm a little bit too old. But gentlemen, the Bible says not to be unequally yoked. Amen. You don't want to marry someone who's a screwball, okay? Unless you are a screwball, all right? No, I actually say, I think she's the people who hired her are getting the money's worth. Okay, no question. She's a very good propagandist. She's done a good job. So here's an evidence. When I travel in the area, I'm always looking for evidence of Agenda 21 to show people, to teach people. And interesting, too, in Boston, you think, gee, how can you have any influence in Boston? It's so far left. Well, I lived in the West Roxbury section, and they wanted to do something called complete streets or smart streets. They wanted to revamp. They wanted to put bike lanes, and they wanted to change it from 2 lanes to 1 lane. And I wrote letters to the newspaper, and we had presentations. And last year, there was, we've been out almost a year and a half. There was a tragic accident just down the street on the main road. And one person did it on me. They called me a fascist, and they called me I was an insane fascist. I guess they're sane fascists and they're insane. There's a degree of fascism, right? Thankfully, I had a couple of liberals that were friends of people that I knew. They said, come on, now this is really pushing it. About 85% of the people in West Roxbury did not want to see these green, the so-called smart streets. In fact, I don't know, if you live in an urban area, you might see, sometimes you'll see a bicycle spray painted white. Those are called ghost bikes. And what happened, somebody was killed there because they're riding a bike in a road that's not designed for bikes. And so they think they're saving the planet. And if you went on the line and say bicycle accidents, they've gone up like 300% in the last 4 or 5 years because more people are riding bikes. And now I think riding bikes are great. But riding bikes on a busy road in Boston, pretty suicidal. And you'll see these little bike lanes, then all of a sudden the bike lane disappears. Yeah. Where the Mack truck appears. And between the bicycle and the Mack truck, if I was a betting man, I'd put my money on the Mack truck. In fact, there were two doctors they lived in Brookline, and they bicycled to nearby the hospital district of Boston, a 5-10 minute drive on a car. And they actually think they're saving the world because of the propaganda, and they died in bike accidents. So Greenovate is one. Greenovate Boston. So I'm saying is even in cities like Boston, you can still have an impact. A little bit of truth goes a long way. Imagine Boston 2030. Now you'll see these things on different towns where they're implementing this. And what I do is I fill it out and I say we need more freedom, we need more homeschooling, and I'll drop a copy of the Constitution. They never seem to call me. They don't really want your opinion. They just give the illusion that they're getting input from people. They've already decided what they're going to do. City planning initiative. You see the word initiative. Now initiative is a good thing. But when you see it from government, run, don't walk to the nearest exit, right? If they talk about initiative, it's top down. It's not coming from the grassroots. It's coming from the top down, whether it be Common Core. The Great Reset didn't come from a little group of grandmothers and a knitting. You know what? Maybe we should have a Great Reset. Let's call Chuck Schwab, and he'll have promoted it. No, it's always coming from the top. So, we've heard the word sustainability. See, the left does a great job of taking good words and renaming them, all right, reusing them. Progressive, as an example. Progress. If you have a house that's falling apart and you put a new roof on it and you landscape it, that's progress. That's not socialism, that's progress. So I hate the word progressive when it comes to these far leftists, because they're retrogressive. Yeah. You show me a city that's run by so-called progressives, I will show you high crime, I will show you broken families, and so forth. So the term sustainability is a term they adopted. Now, there are farms. There's a farm diagonally across from me. Same family since 1792. That's pretty impressive. So they're doing something right. Farmers know how to farm, and they pass it off to the next generation. They don't need bureaucrats in New York City or at the UN to tell them how to farm, or if you fish. People who fish know how to fish. They've been doing it for generations. They're sustainable. They do sustainable things. If you have a forest, if you or if you harvest maple syrup, you know that you have to plant maple trees. Do die, but they live a long time. So you're going to plant a tree not for you, but for your grandchildren. So they'll be harvesting 30 years down the road, 40 years down the road. That's true sustainability. We have a summer camp program here. This particular camp, they have to do things. They have to provide a service at a good price, so they'll be sustainable. But sustainability, according to the UN, is a whole Agenda 21. The town of Provincetown, Massachusetts, it's the so-called gay resort. I think half the population is homosexual. The high school closed in 2010. Why? Because people don't procreate, so they lose population. They have to get people into Provincetown. Well, Provincetown belongs to a UN entity called the ICLEI, which I'll talk about in a few seconds, and they're considered a sustainable community. Just the opposite is true. They're not sustainable. If they kept, there'd be nobody there. The place would be dead. Any country or city or town or county that has a diminishing population, you'll see more crime, and you'll see more unemployment, and more drug abuse, and all the things of that nature. Cities that are growing in population tend to be, unless they're being inundated by illegal aliens, because people want to live there. They want to make it a better place. So the thrust of Agenda 21 is to transform traditional individual property rights into collective property rights.
So I think everybody who calls himself or herself a Christian should automatically be an environmentalist in the true sense of the word. We are stewards of this great planet that God gave us. Yeah. My little 2.5 acres, I'm going to die, I'm going to pass it off, my wife and I. We just have it for a time, and we're good stewards of that little 2.5 acres. I think it's a jungle, living in the city, 2.5 acres. I have neighbors with 100 acres, so I thought 2.5 acres was big. Good. That's a little postage stamp. Free market versus socialism. This is very important. This book was put out by the Rand Corporation, believe it or not. They're the ones that came up with this visionary sessions, right? Research and Development, it's called. Troubled Lands, a Legacy of Soviet Environmental Destruction. Why was there environmental destruction in the Soviet Union? Anybody have an idea? Any camper? Maybe, let's see. Didn't Stalin love trees? Why? Because there was no private property. Because the government owned all of the land, and they abused it. And you will see that the socialist and communist countries, most of them in environmental basket cases, because they don't have private property, they don't have people taking care of the land. And of course, Congress, in its infinite stupidity or evil, they banned this incredible incandescent light bulb. One of the greatest inventions of the world that wasn't invented by Al Gore. And what do they replace it with? They replace it with these bulbs that are filled with mercury, that if you break them, you're supposed to call a hazmat team to come out. And by the way, I think they're helping us go blind, because they're much dimmer. They might last a little longer. But, I like the free market. I like the free market system. Give me a 100-watt incandescent bulb anytime over these other ones. I don't care if they don't last as long. I'd like to be able to see what I'm doing. Amen. And again, this is totally unconstitutional. And I have a little phone that's the green economy, celebrating old technology. I visited the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and they actually had a battery-powered car. And they could, 100 years, 1903, and the Germans couldn't even get it right, and they were some of the best engineers, right? Now, there's nothing wrong with driving a battery-powered car. If you live on Nantucket, that'd be great, because everything's 10 minutes away. I would not want to rely on a battery-powered car to do what I do, because I would get on if I'm going downtown Boston from Alton, New Hampshire, and I see that little, and I want to put the AC on or the heat on, I want to see that little needle going low, low, low. And by the way, batteries, it costs a lot to build them. It takes a lot of technology, a lot of hard minerals, mining, strip mining. They're not that environmentally friendly, and they're very expensive, and they're not going to replace the internal combustion engine. Not going to happen, as much as Al Gore wants it to. And by the way, the left loves high gas prices, because it keeps people like us restricted from traveling. Yep. How about solar panels? Solyndra, you remember Solyndra? I remember President Obama. He was running a campaign on green energy, green jobs, heavily subsidized by the federal government. Well, Solyndra was one of them, and they went out of business. Now, you see, again, I'm not against solar panels. If you want to put a solar panel and pay for it out of your own pocket, put it on your roof or your land, go for it. I think Dr. Walton has some on his, right? But the notion that these solar panels are going to replace oil and coal and natural gas is ludicrous. I don't have the exact mathematics, but to power the city of New York, you'd have to use the state of Connecticut for solar panels, something crazy like that. Now, there's an old expression, solar's all right, but nukes do it all night. In order to have solar energy, you need to have sun, right? Yeah. You also need, in the wintertime, when it snows, it's covered. And this stuff is made by heavy metals, not very environmentally friendly. So where you once saw a beautiful pasture or a field, now you see, they call them solar farms. They don't have seeds and grow, okay? And there was, I remember some leftist group in Massachusetts, they're going to plant nice little plants all around the solar panels. We're going to plant some vegetables too. Well, if you do that and eat them, you're going to die, because you're going to get all this nasty stuff. And these things have a shelf life of so many years. Usually by the time they start paying for themselves, that's when you're going to replace them. And what's also interesting is that there was a meatpacking company in New Jersey, one of the bigger ones, I can't remember its name, and they had solar panels on their buildings. And they didn't have a kill switch. There was a fire that night. The fire department shows up and puts the spotlight on the panels, started producing electricity. The place burned down to the ground, right? They weren't able to. So much for being green. They're being out of business because of that. Wind turbines, right? Windmills, that's another old technology. And there's nothing wrong with old technology if it works, right? The windmill of the Greek engineer Heron of Alexandria in the 1st century AD is the earliest known instance of using a wind-driven wheel to power a machine. And ill wind blowing. Now, a lot of folks think this is, initially I thought this was a good idea. When I was not as well informed, I thought, wow, this is a good thing. These monstrosities cost over about $1.5 to $3 or $4 million a piece. You need tons of concrete to set it, because it has to withstand hurricane force winds. The fluid inside of the device catches fire every so often, in fact more frequently than not, and you can't call 911 and they have a hook and ladder come out. You just can't. You can't do it. By the time the helicopter shows, it's gone. The propellers, if it's a cold area, the propellers will get ice, and the ice will throw projectiles. And I don't know if there's been any instance of people being killed, but it's possible. They kill lots and lots and lots of birds. And if you have a nice mountaintop that you cover with wind turbines, you've got to do clear cutting. Then you have to have access roads to get up there to build these things and to service them, and you have to have the transmission lines coming down. And just like solar panels, you rely, in this case, you need the wind. If there's no wind, there's no energy. The grid needs energy. And so they have to have backup generators that burn fossil fuels, gas or gas or oil. What else is wrong with these things? If it's too windy, You gotta shut them down because they'll break. And you can go online and put down wind turbines, abandoned wind turbines. You're gonna see hundreds of thousands of these things. But there's big money in this. I call it the green mafia. There's big money. And also, if you live near one of these places, there's a strobe effect. And there's also, it emits these sound waves that are unhealthy too. And there's a documentary on it. I wish I remembered the name of it. It was in upstate New York, and I went through the town a few times, and they did a documentary. You might just want to put documentary on wind turbines. It was a company from Ireland that came in and basically bribed people. They'd find one person to be the first farm, to put these things in, and then other people would go along with it. And they deeply regret it now. How about the solar dryer? Now, I didn't realize that my dear late mother was an environmentalist because we use something called a clothesline. But even clotheslines have their downfall because you put your wet laundry and the birdies like to do their business on them. Or the window will be dust. And in the wintertime, if you live up here, it freezes. So even the solar dryer has its downfall, right? This was a place in Belfast, Maine, which is central coastal Maine. This was a farm that somebody bought, free market, fine, private property, eco-village, or eco-village. They're building these little tiny 300, 400 square foot units. You have a common living room, a common bathroom, and you cannot bring your evil car onto the property. If you want to live that way, that's fine. We should have that choice. But I don't prefer to live that way. It should be by volunteer, not by coercion, okay? Now, free market versus socialism. How many people have read the Constitution? Every hand's going to go up, right? Every hand. Well, you read some of it, right? How many people have read the UN Charter? Not so many. I know Mr. V. Where's Mr. V? He's out in front of the UN. There he is. He and his JBS chapter. Get us out of the UN. They're out there all the time trying to get people to expose this group. Well, the UN Charter and the U.S. Constitution are diametrically opposite each other. The U.S. Constitution protects God-given rights. The UN Charter doesn't mention where rights come from. It's assumed it's coming from government. And they grant you a right, and the next chapter they take that right away. And I tell this because the man who gave us the UN Charter, who wrote most of it, was a man named Alger Hiss. He was a Soviet spy. He was an agent of Stalin. So what could come out of the pen of a man like that? Nothing good. How many people have read the Communist Manifesto? Oh, a few hands went up. Well, there's not a whole lot. Commies like to have big, long, boring dissertations, but Karl Marx, by the way, he was commissioned to write this. It wasn't even his own creativity. And by the way, Patrice Cullors of Black Lives Matter said that we're trained Marxists. She's calling everybody a racist. Karl Marx was a racist and an anti-Semite. He wrote a book called The World Without Jews. I'm getting off the topic a little bit, but it's important. So if you looked at the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto, number 1, abolition of property. If somebody asked me for give me Agenda 21 in a nutshell, that's what I would say, abolition of private property. By the way, he also didn't like homeschooling. He didn't like the Institute of Marriage. I can see where the BLM would adopt that. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state, that's number 5. And if the left has its way, carbon credits would be the currency that we'd be using. Okay. And here's a picture of the UN. How many of you have ever visited the UN? Yeah, I visited. There's a statue of a handgun that's tied in a knot. And my former colleague, William Grigg, wrote a little book on the subject. And that was on the front cover. And this left-wing professor, Nutter, which would be a good name for most professors, Nutter. He was writing about this obscure book. It was so obscure, why you mentioned it? So William Grigg got a hold of the guy, and Nutter said, "Do you really think the UN wants to disarm us?" He said, "Professor Nutter, have you ever been to the UN?" He said, "Yes, I have been." "Have you noticed the statue that's in front of the entranceway?" He said, "It's a gun, a handgun tied in a knot." He says, "Professor, where I come from, it's called a clue." Now, we're told, and even some people that are on our side, in most cases, oh, the UN is just a waste of time. They're just useless. Really? Tell that to the poor people that have had UN troops in their communities. Here is a map of UN activities all over the world. They even have a university in Japan. They monitor our elections, by the way. And now one person at the UN has been democratically elected. They're all appointed. Mostly I call it a socialist group. Now here's Alger Hiss. An upper middle class background, went to an Ivy League college. He had opportunities that this was privilege, right? And what did he do? He betrayed his country because of it. He's a vile human being. Or was. Now here are UN troops. How come you didn't see this? This happened in the 1993 or 95. These are white soldiers. They're torturing a black Somalian national. I don't know what this guy did, but nothing justifies that. You know, if you were in the military, I was in the Army, one of the first things we learned is you never carry out an unlawful order. That is an unlawful order. Yeah. They should say, we're not doing it, sir. Not doing it. Now, these were two white policemen in Boston or New York. Wow. You would have seen this on every single until there was a race war, right? But here you didn't even hear about it. But I have to say it was the Village Voice that broke the story, believe it or not. So sometimes there's an old saying, a stop clock is right twice a day. Mm-hmm. And here in the UN Peacekeepers, this was one of their first missions in a place called Gatanga. What's the name of the country now? Yeah, thank you. Yes. I actually met a gentleman who was one of their leaders at that Christian conference where I met Jonathan Alexander. And they have a constitution now that mentions Christianity. It's come a long way. But it was taken over by a communist, Patrice Lumumba. And the UN, mostly white troops, went in and they killed, murdered, and raped. That's what they do. And you didn't hear about this at your model UN class, right? Don't talk about this. Hey, and we're bringing democracy at the point of a gun. And this is an important book called Death by Government. When people say, oh, we need to ban handguns, we don't want private people, we don't want civilians owning weapons, right? This guy was a leftist professor, or I should say liberal. I make the distinction. There are intellectually honest liberals, and then there are leftists who aren't intellectually honest. R.J. Remley, he was a professor of Hawaii. He said that more people have been killed by government in the 20th century, and he's not talking about in peacetime, than are killed during wartime. Millions of people. And we've taught a class on this over the years. I think Mr. Kalis was the last one to do it. We may do it next year. It's kind of a gruesome topic. I remember that the city of Boston sold some of their excess handguns, their police weapons, and some of the city councils were really upset because this might be sold to the private sector. Well, they discovered it was being sold to a government in Central America. Oh, that's good. So I actually sent them an excerpt from this book listing all the people that were murdered by governments. I said, maybe it's not such a good thing. Another book was called Lords of Poverty, how the UN in their programs bring poverty to nations. And I don't have the time to go into all of the details about this. So let me get into Agenda 21. It started back in, well, we can say it started from the pits of hell, right? Mm-hmm. But there were lots of well-intentioned people that buy into this. But Vancouver, 1976, they came out with this: all countries should establish as a matter of urgency a national policy on human settlements involving the distribution of population over national territory. That's not in our Constitution, folks. No. Such a policy should be devised to facilitate population redistribution to, quote, availability of resources, socialism. And then the World Commission on Environment and Development, that was in the late 80s. And then, of course, the conference in 1992. Did anybody remember when this was going on? Well, some of you weren't born. They had representatives from about 160 nations. The Beach Boys played there, right?
Yeah.
They had all kinds of things. Al Gore was there. Of course, he would. Where else? And George H.W. Bush. He actually signed Agenda 21. What makes Agenda 21 worse than, say, a treaty, it's called soft law. So they say, well, that's not a law. What's the big deal? It's not a treaty. Yeah, it's even worse because you simply just administer it. You just adopt the policies throughout the country. This is a little book, sort of like what was that, Crib Notes, one of those
Cliff note.
Cliff Notes, yeah, this is like a Cliff Notes, because Agenda 21 is like 800 pages and 40 chapters. So this is the guy, David Sitar's. Effective execution of Agenda 21 will require a profound reorientation of all human society, unlike anything the world has ever experienced. A major shift in the priorities of both government and individuals and an unprecedented redeployment of human and financial resources. This shift will demand that a concern for the environmental consequences of every human action be integrated into individual and collective decision-making at every level. That's a modest agenda, huh? Completely change the world. This was a picture of me, I don't know, that's about 10 years ago. We are in Connecticut, and we come out, the ICLEI is the International Council for Local Environmental Initiative, which is a UN government-to-government entity founded 2 years before Rio. And somebody came up and said, "Who's this ICLEI guy?" "Oh, he's a nasty person. We need to kick him out." Let's see. Here we go. Oh, what happened? Here we go. That's not supposed to happen. Slideshow. Well, it looks like something happened to my slides. I'm going to start from the beginning and see what happens. I have a... No, if not, I'll just finish it off the top of my head.
Right.
When you do 7... Oh, here we go. Here we go. Okay. When you do 700 presentations, you have a lot of, you retain a lot of them. So one of the, I'd say he's the grandfather of Agenda 21 is Maurice Strong. And Maurice Strong is since deceased. He moved to communist China, which is a good place for him. And prior to the conference, he was driving around with a reporter by the name of David Wood, I think, a Canadian, and a liberal guy. And he's talking about writing a novel. And he says this: "Isn't the only hope for the planet that the industrialized civilizations collapse? Isn't it our responsibility to bring that about?" So you plan, this is the Great Reset, before it's called the Great Reset. Now this gentleman, I shouldn't call him a gentleman, he owned 40 pieces of property all over the world. He flew around a private jet. As an elitist, he's above all that, like John Kerry. And he was a New Age devotee. And at the UN conference, at the conference in Rio, he said the greatest threat to the world. Now, what do you think? It's 1992. What do you think the greatest threat to the world would be? Maybe nuclear war would be something that people are concerned about. He said it was the American middle class. It was the biggest threat to the world. Why is that? All right, now I want you to fess up now. How many people live in single-family homes? Oh, come on, fess up. That's right. How many people drive an internal combustion engine? How many? Oh, you evil people. How many people like to have red meat once in a while? Oh, everything goes up. Oh, yeah. You're just admitting that you're evil criminals. Right? You have air conditioning at your home, not here.
I took a photo.
How many people heat their home with oil or gas? Or even firewood? Yeah. Man, you guys are war criminals. No, I mean, that's what they say. Now, Jacques Cousteau, how many remember this guy? Jacques Cousteau. Do they still show his programs, the Embassy World of Jacques Cousteau? Well, I would say that he was a World War II hero, and he was an innovator in submarine technology. Those are the two things in his favor. Everything else on the negative side. UNESCO courier. Now, by the way, you don't have to believe me. Do your own checking, right? Yep. As Willie, what does Willie Soon say? Perez Soon, he said, "In God we trust, everybody else, bring your data," right? The UNESCO courier, this is the United Nations Education, Science, Cultural Organization. Oh, the UN is just useless, but they want to have an impact on everything. Culture, science. He said this, it was a long interview, and you can find it. I used to have the original hard copy, but I lost it. "One American tires the earth much more than 20 Bangladeshis. World population must be stabilized, and to do that we must eliminate 350,000 people per day." He wanted to say, it's a terrible thing to say, but it's even worse not to say it. Interestingly enough, he never offers himself as a sacrifice. Yeah. And then at the Earth Summit, he said, an American-born child environmentally is too expensive to maintain to his or her adulthood in a world economy. That means a socialist economy. American women must be subjected to some manner of regulation beyond licensing and mandatory abortion practices. Are you ladies okay with that? Licensing? So what sounds crazy today, tomorrow becomes policy. How many people would think that there are 50 genders, 20 or 30? Even the left said that's ridiculous. Today, if you don't buy into this, you're some kind of racist or hate monger, right? Yep. They're liars, and we just need to expose their lies. That's all we need to do. So I know I'm only got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to sort of speed it up a little bit. But I do want to mention this. This was the biodiversity map, and at the Rio conference, in addition to the Agenda 21, was this biodiversity treaty, which would have basically shut off most of the United States. And our late friend, Dr. Michael Kaufman, and just a few others, he was an instructor here, he was able to stop a treaty at the Senate, and it was a Democrat-controlled Senate at that time. But when they got word this was happening, they took it off. They never voted on it. And by the way, we know under the Constitution, in order to have a treaty, you need what? You need 2/3 of the Senate to sign off on it. A lot of these things, these agreements, they're not even passed by law. They're just something that the president might sign, like the climate, the Paris Accord. That was not a law. That was something that Obama said that's what we're going to do. We're going to cut back to nothing, and we're going to give billions of dollars to our enemies. That's basically what the Paris Accord is. So Trump got us out.
Yep, they put
us right back in. So, so this is one of the groups, the ICLEI, that is undermining local government to implement Agenda 21. You can go to their website. They used to put every town in every state, and we used that. We were picking them off left and right. We were getting lots of towns to pull out over the years. Had a lot of success with it. And this is a group I want to recommend, cfap.org. They have great resources. And so, because you're going to be confronted when you go out and you get on this hill, and your classmates, if you're in public school, most of you aren't though, and just in the culture itself, you're going to come up with this. And by the way, I also want to mention that that's why the left is so upset with Roe v. Wade, because it's going to make population control hopefully a little more difficult. I won't go through this. I just want to say that the ICLEI is unconstitutional because under Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, no state shall enter into any treaty, alliance, or confederation, into any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power. ICLEI is a federal, it's an international government-to-government entity, and it should be unconstitutional. So if you live in a town that has it, get a hold of me, and I will help you. We'll come up with a plan and work to get out, and it can be done. ICLEI's agenda, by 2050, 2/3 of all humans will be living in cities. That's their goal, 2/3 of all people living in cities. But I think, thanks to COVID, that's changed, that's set them back just a little bit. And I'm just going to, and they'll tell you, they'll say, oh, another conspiracy theory here. Well, look, Local Agenda 21 Planning Guide. You can find this book online and download it, I think, for free. So he'd say, really? This is a conspiracy theory? Then how come they say Local Agenda 21? That's when the conversation ends. If they're intellectually honest, you'll win them over. If not, then they'll just leave you and call you names. They'll call you, another thing is called the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. That's the word initiative, right? Who come up with it?
Yeah.
It was Franklin's idea. He came up with it, and the powers to be said, yeah, we like that idea, we're going to implement. No, another top-down. This, by the way, is on its way out. But what they wanted to use carbon credits as a means. Let's say you have solar panels in your house, and the meat company down the road is using more CO2s, so then you take your carbon credits, and you'll get them, and it's a form of currency. It has not been adopted, thankfully. That's ICLEI in Maine. And I'll just skip that. The EPA is one of the entities that's actually environmental protective agency, an unconstitutional federal entity that's implementing it. Under Trump, they weren't doing it, but now under Biden they will. But I want to get into some good news, if I can. Oh, so you remember I showed you that little box that wanted your opinions in Boston, and this is the one that was in Nashville, New Hampshire. Granite State Future. A friend of mine started a website called Granite State Futures that counters everything they do. They tried to get it pulled down. They said, hey, you can't. It's a public entity. You can't do it. So, and this was a big success story in Ringe, New Hampshire. We used to have our camp there for many years. And Agenda 21 tried to come into that town through the planning board, not even through the selectmen. And I got wind of it, and I wrote a letter to the local newspaper, and I posted that paper on its Facebook page. And a gentleman by the name of Larry Cleveland got a hold of me and said, Hal, I don't know anything about this, but the people behind it are the bad people, the people we don't like in town. And so he boned up on it. We offered him some resources. He started a group called Save Our Town. They had warrant articles, that's like referendum questions. This was November, now it's March. And all of the things passed by 2/3. They kicked it out, lock, stock, and barrel. And in the wake of that, they had me labeled as this guy from Boston. You're horrible. You don't even live here, right? And it was a lot of fun. They even had a blog going after me and Larry. Larry was a little upset about it. I said, "This is beautiful." So I would post. I said, "If you keep this up," they said that we stole the town. I said, "If you keep it up, we're going to put a couple of tire recycling plants right in the center of the village." You know. So don't worry about being smeared. You know, there's an old saying: if you're catching flack, that means you're over the target, right? So they tried to come up with these charrettes. And we like to sit in on all these things, right? A charrette is a visionary session. Everything's been pre-selected, but it gives you the idea that you're part of the solution, okay? So let me just go over here. What's wrong with this picture, right? You don't want to put a wind turbine that close to a school. You're going to get some people sick and probably get them hurt, right? Again, I only have another, I'm a stickler for not going over time. By the way, we had a free market cleanup in the oldest canal in the country. Not one environmentalist showed up. Not one, right? We should do stuff like that. We sponsor 2 miles of highway in Alton, New Hampshire. It has a little sign, Camp Constitution, on both north and south. So it's something you may want to consider in your town to bring awareness. I want to show some success stories. I want to mention this Amtrak, right? I did have a friend that was an Amtrak conductor. We used to get free rides from Boston to New York. But one time I had to buy a ticket. Where'd it go? Where'd it go? Here. Not there. Oh, here we go. So after I bought my ticket, this thing showed up. Offset your carbon by donating to some organization. So I sent an email to the CEO. I said, why don't you have a free market credit? So if I'm buying a ticket from a socialist entity and promoting socialism, should I have an option to donate to a free market? He never responded to me. And I wrote a letter to their newspaper, or their magazine, they never published it. So anyway, here's some success stories. There's so many of them. A number of towns and cities have got out of ICLEI. Smart meters decision in Maine was done away with. There's been resolutions introduced all over the country to get not to implement Agenda 21. Gateway 1. They love the word gateway. You see the word gateway. That's probably Agenda 21. We had some people that approached Governor LePage about it. Within a day, he completely defunded it. Let's see. Carver, Massachusetts. We held a presentation. Carver, someone here from Carver, I believe, right? Carver, the next day, the town council got out of the ICLEI. It was great. We had a lot of fun there. What can you do? Spread the word and tell the people. Inform elected officials and opinion molders. We have a lot of resources on our website as well. Visit your town halls. Get to know the people, your town clerk, your city councilor, the editor of a local newspaper. Host a meeting like this. Host a meeting and show a video in your home or at a local library. Those local libraries, they have meeting rooms. They're not just for people on the left. They're for anyone who lives in that town, right? Facebook, put the information on Facebook. We have a number of Facebook pages, and Camp Constitution is a great resource. Tom DeWeese, who's a friend of mine and a friend of Willie's, and I think some other folks here, American Policy Center. Tom's probably the foremost expert on the country. His website has great resources. They even have an Agenda 21 kit. The Heartland Institute, that's where I met Professor Soon. They have great resources, and a lot of times they'll mail you free stuff. You say, I'm an educator, I'm a homeschooler.
Yep.
Oh, how many copies do you want?
Yep.
You know, they'll send you copies of all these different things. And CFAC, which I mentioned earlier. And of course, attend Camp Constitution. You're here, right?
Sorry.
All right, and activism. This was in the town of Belfast, Maine. They had got out of Italy. We didn't know that. It was like 6 months before, but it was still listed on their website. So the reporter came up to us and he said, gee, you know, you're 6 months behind. I said, no. I said, you were 2 years behind because you never wrote about this 2.5 years ago. You should have been warning people in this town. Oh, he didn't like that, right? But we had a lot of fun. I tell you what we did. I was with my son, and this was about 8 to 9 years ago. We got right in front of the town hall, and they put this banner, one across the street to the restaurant, and there's a friend of mine that lived a little south, and she calls up and she says, gee, I'm thinking about setting up business, but what is this Italy? I'm concerned about Italy, because they might not be good for business. So within 5 minutes, you see these people coming out of town hall, looking over pictures, taking pictures of the van. You got to have a little fun when you're doing this stuff, folks. So, and this was a parade we had in Dedham, Massachusetts, and that was our uncle said, but we know the real guy, but that was a cutout. And right behind us was the Agenda 21 truck, and they thought they were just, when they found out we were there, and we were passing out stuff on the subject too. So we had a lot of fun doing that. And there I am again in Connecticut. And that's it. I hope